For years, Mike Tyson was untouchable, undefeated, invincible, the baddest man on the planet. 37 wins, 0 losses. He destroyed everyone in his path. Champions fell in seconds. Legends crumbled under his assault. The world had watched him demolish Michael Spinks in 91 seconds. They'd seen him terrorize an entire division, and they believed nothing could stop him. Mike Tyson wasn't just a fighter, he was a force of nature, a myth made real. But on February 11, 1990, in Tokyo, Japan, that myth died. A 42-1 underdog named James "Buster" Douglas knocked Mike Tyson out cold in the 10th round. It was the biggest upset in boxing history, the most shocking moment the sport had ever seen. And it changed everything. Mike didn't just lose that night. He was humiliated, knocked down in the 8th round for the first time in his career. Then in the 10th, he was knocked out, face down on the canvas, mouthpiece flying through the air, the referee counting him out while he struggled to find his footing. The invincible Iron Mike, the man who had terrified an entire division, was finished. And the world watched in disbelief. Today, Mike is 58 years old. He's had a long career since that February night in Tokyo. Comebacks, championships won and lost, retirements. But the Douglas fight still haunts him, not because Buster was the better fighter, but because Mike knows he lost that fight before he ever stepped into the ring. The discipline was gone, the focus was gone, and the hunger that had made him great had been replaced by arrogance and complacency. February 11, 1990 wasn't just a loss. It was a wake-up call Mike didn't see coming. Just 18 months earlier, Mike Tyson had been at his absolute peak. On June 27, 1988, he destroyed Michael Spinks in 91 seconds. It was the most dominant performance of his career. Mike was the undisputed heavyweight champion, undefeated, unstoppable, the most feared fighter in the world. But after the Spinks fight, things started to change, slowly at first, then faster. In late 1988, Mike fired Kevin Rooney, his longtime trainer. Rooney had been with Mike since the Cus D'Amato days. He was the last connection to the discipline that had made Mike great. He knew how to keep Mike disciplined. He knew how to keep Mike sharp. But Mike didn't want discipline anymore. He didn't want someone telling him what to do. He wanted control. And promoter Don King was more than happy to give it to him. King took over Mike's career completely. He surrounded Mike with yes-men who wouldn't challenge him, trainers who nodded along, handlers who told Mike what he wanted to hear, not what he needed to hear. And the structure that had made Mike great began to crumble. The training camps became looser. Mike started showing up late to the gym. The intense sparring sessions that had once been mandatory became optional. The strict diet disappeared. Mike was partying more, drinking more, surrounding himself with the wrong people. And, worst of all, he stopped listening to anyone who tried to correct him. He was the heavyweight champion of the world. He was undefeated. Why did he need to change? But boxing is a cruel sport, and it punishes complacency. Mike was about to learn that lesson the hard way. James "Buster" Douglas wasn't supposed to win. He was a 42-1 underdog. Most people didn't even think the fight would be competitive. Douglas had talent, but he'd always been inconsistent. He'd lost to fighters he should have beaten. He'd never shown the killer instinct needed to be a champion. He was seen as a tune-up fight for Mike, a warm-up before bigger opponents. But Buster Douglas had something Mike didn't know about. Motivation. 23 days before the fight, Buster's mother, Lula Pearl, died suddenly from a stroke. She was only 46 years old. She'd been his biggest supporter. His rock. The one person who always believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. She'd told him before she died that he was going to beat Mike Tyson. She'd seen something in her son that the rest of the world hadn't, and her death devastated him. Buster considered pulling out of the fight. The grief was overwhelming, but his family convinced him to go through with it. "Your mother would want you to fight," they told him. So Buster made a decision. He would dedicate the fight to her memory. He trained harder than he'd ever trained in his life. He studied Mike's weaknesses obsessively. He watched tape of fighters who had given Mike trouble. And he came to Tokyo with a plan and a purpose. He wasn't just fighting for a championship, he was fighting for his mother, for her belief in him, for her memory. Physically, Douglas was a good matchup for Mike. He stood 6'4", a full 6 inches taller than Mike. He had an 83-inch reach compared to Mike's 71 inches. He could use his jab to keep Mike at distance. He could box from the outside. And most importantly, he wasn't afraid. While the rest of the boxing world saw Mike as unbeatable, Buster saw a fighter who'd grown lazy. A fighter who wasn't training the way he used to. A fighter who was vulnerable. And Buster was ready to prove it. The fight was scheduled for February 11, 1990, at the Tokyo Dome in Japan. It wasn't a major pay-per-view event in the United States. It was shown on HBO. The build-up was minimal. Mike barely promoted the fight. He seemed disinterested, bored. He showed up to press conferences late. He looked out of shape. He talked about Buster like he was an afterthought. "I'll knock him out in 3 rounds, Mike said. This won't take long." Buster, for his part, stayed quiet. He didn't engage in trash talk. He didn't make bold predictions. He just trained. And when reporters asked him if he thought he could win, he said simply, "Yes, I'm going to shock the world." But no one believed him. The betting odds were ridiculous. 42-1 in favor of Mike. Casinos were offering refunds to anyone who bet on Douglas if the fight went past the 3rd round. That's how much of a mismatch everyone thought it was. Mike's training camp was a disaster. He wasn't sparring seriously. His sparring partners were handpicked to make him look good, not to challenge him. He was out late at night in Tokyo exploring the nightlife instead of resting. He was more interested in the clubs than the fight ahead. Stories leaked of him showing up to the gym hours late, going through the motions, then leaving early. His conditioning work was minimal. His team knew something was wrong, but no one said anything. Don King didn't care as long as the paychecks kept coming. And Mike's yes men weren't about to risk their positions by telling him the truth. So Mike walked into the Tokyo Dome on February 11, 1990, completely unprepared. And Buster Douglas was ready to make history. February 11, 1990. Tokyo Dome. The atmosphere was electric, but not because people expected a war. They expected a coronation. Another Mike Tyson knockout. Another victim added to his record. The Japanese crowd filled the arena. Mike entered the ring looking sluggish. His body didn't have the same sharpness it had against Spinks. Buster, meanwhile, looked focused, determined. When the bell rang, it was clear something was different. From the opening round, Buster fought the perfect fight. He used his jab to keep Mike at distance. Every time Mike tried to get inside, Buster popped him with a stiff jab and moved away. Mike, for his part, looked slow. His head movement wasn't there. His footwork was flat. He was loading up on big punches, trying to land one knockout shot. But Buster was too disciplined. He stuck to the game plan. Jab, move, circle, don't let Mike get set. By the middle rounds, it was obvious. Buster was winning. He was outboxing Mike, outlanding him, making him miss. The crowd started to sense something was happening. This wasn't supposed to be competitive, but Buster was dominating. Mike's corner was getting desperate. They told him to press harder, to take risks, but Mike couldn't find his rhythm. And Buster just kept jabbing, kept moving, kept winning rounds. Then came the 8th round, and everything changed. Midway through the 8th round, Buster landed a perfect uppercut. It came out of nowhere. A short, compact punch that traveled no more than 12 inches, but it caught Mike flush on the chin with devastating accuracy. Mike's eyes went blank for a split second. His legs wobbled beneath him. His body went stiff. And then for the first time in his professional career, Mike Tyson went down. He hit the canvas hard. The sound echoed through the Tokyo Dome. The crowd erupted in disbelief. The commentators' voices rose to a fever pitch. Mike Tyson, the invincible destroyer, the man who had never been knocked down, was on the ground. He got up quickly at the count of 4, trying to show he was fine. But everyone could see the truth. He was hurt. The referee, Octavio Mayrin, gave him a mandatory standing 8 count. Mike nodded, trying to shake off the cobwebs. His corner was screaming at him to stay calm. But the damage was done. The aura of invincibility had cracked. Mike came back swinging. He landed a huge right hand that hurt Buster. Buster's knees buckled. He looked shaky. For a moment, it seemed like Mike might turn the fight around. The round ended with both fighters having been hurt. But as they went back to their corners, one thing was clear. Mike Tyson was mortal. He could be hurt. He could be dropped. And Buster Douglas had just proven it. The question now was, could he finish the job? Round 10 began. Mike came out desperate. He needed a knockout. But Buster was calm, composed. He went back to his jab, back to his game plan. Mike was swinging wildly, trying to land the knockout punch, but he was exhausted. His punches had no snap. His defense was gone, and then halfway through the round, Buster saw his opening. He threw a 4-punch combination: jab, right hand, left hook, right uppercut. All 4 landed clean. Mike stumbled backward. His legs gave out completely. He fell to the canvas face first. The impact was sickening. His mouthpiece flew out of his mouth and landed several feet away on the white canvas. The referee, Octavio Mayrin, began the count. 1, 2, 3. Mike tried to get up. He rolled over onto his back. He could hear the count but couldn't process it. 4, 5, 6. He grabbed for the ropes, trying to pull himself up, but he was disoriented, confused. 7, 8. His eyes were searching desperately for his mouthpiece. He was fumbling on his hands and knees, looking for it like it was the only thing that mattered. 9. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. 10. It was over. Mike Tyson had been knocked out. For the first time in his career, he'd been counted out. The count of 10 echoed through the arena, and the boxing world stood still in disbelief. Buster Douglas raised his arms in victory. He'd done it. The 42-1 underdog had knocked out the most feared fighter on the planet. The Tokyo Dome exploded. Commentators were screaming. Reporters were rushing the ring. And Mike? He sat on the canvas, dazed, confused, humiliated. The myth of invincibility was dead, and everyone had just witnessed it live. Mike Tyson is 58 years old now. He's lived an entire life since that night in Tokyo. He came back from the Douglas loss. He reclaimed the heavyweight title years later. He went to prison. He retired. He came back again. But the Douglas fight marked a turning point. After February 11, 1990, Mike was never the same. The fear factor was gone. Fighters knew he could be beaten. They knew he could be hurt. And Mike knew it too. "I didn't take that fight seriously," Mike has said in interviews. "I was out of shape. I wasn't focused. I thought I could just show up and win." There's regret in his voice when he talks about it. Not because Buster won, but because Mike knows he beat himself. He let the discipline slip. He let the hunger fade. And boxing punished him for it. Buster Douglas, meanwhile, became a one-fight champion. He lost the heavyweight title in his very first defense, getting knocked out by Evander Holyfield 8 months later. Buster's career never reached those heights again, but on February 11, 1990, he was the best heavyweight in the world. And no one can ever take that away from him. He shocked the world, and he proved that even the most dominant champions can fall. February 11, 1990 will forever be remembered as the night the impossible happened. A 42-1 underdog knocked out the undefeated heavyweight champion in one of the most shocking upsets in sports history. Mike Tyson, the man who had terrorized the heavyweight division, was knocked out cold in the 10th round. And the myth of invincibility was shattered. For boxing fans, especially those who watched it live, the Douglas fight represents the moment when everything changed. But the legacy goes beyond the upset. The Douglas fight was proof that discipline matters, that preparation matters, that no matter how talented you are, if you don't respect the sport will humble you. Mike had all the talent in the world, but he lost focus. He fired the people who kept him sharp. He surrounded himself with yes men, and he paid the price. Buster Douglas, meanwhile, showed the world what motivation and preparation can do. He came in with a plan, he executed it perfectly, and he made history. For Mike, the Douglas fight was a turning point. He would never recapture the dominance he had in the late 1980s. He would have more great moments, more knockouts, more drama. But the fear that once surrounded him was gone. Fighters knew he was beatable, and Mike knew it too. For Buster, the fight was the pinnacle of his career. He became heavyweight champion of the world. He achieved something no one thought possible. And for one night in Tokyo, he was the greatest fighter on the planet. Here's the final question. Could Mike Tyson have beaten Buster Douglas if he'd trained properly? Probably, but he didn't. And that's the lesson. In boxing, talent isn't enough. You need discipline. You need hunger. You need respect for your opponent and the sport. Mike lost all three, and on February 11, 1990, Buster Douglas made him pay. The biggest upset in boxing history, the night the world stood still, the night Iron Mike fell.